The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
You're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Monday, May 1st, May Day, 2017. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a lot of news to cover, a lot of stories, some breaking news, interview here in the studio, lots happening. But I want to start the show by thanking two groups of people, a group of people and an individual. First of all, thanks to all of our patrons. Without you, this is not possible. If you have been watching and following along, you know what YouTube is doing to independent content creators like myself, completely decimating our revenue stream. And without our patrons, we can't do it. So thank you so much to all of our patrons. I want to give a special shout out to the man behind the desk tonight, running. He didn't expect this. Max, my normal producer, is not in studio, but we have Alexander the Meh, who, if you're in the Twitterverse, you should know him. He runs with us. He's been interviewing here at the studio with us, and he's running the board. So, John, I fully expect everything to just go completely wrong tonight, and if it does, it's totally okay because I threw you in the deep end. But thanks a lot. All right, so first thing I want to talk about, Betsy DeVos. DeVos sounds like Davros. If you know Davros, you already understand the joke. Betsy DeVos, I attended Bethune-Cookman University when it was Bethune-Cookman College, long before it even became a university, many years ago. I went for 2 years and I transferred out because of life. But in the 2 years that I was there, Bethune-Cookman is a phenomenal university. It is an HBCU, historically black college and university. They have decided for the 2017 commencement speech to bring in Betsy DeVos to be the commencement speaker. Some of their justification is the fact that Bethune-Cookman depends on Title II and Title III money from the federal government. I totally get not going to war with Donald Trump in order to secure your money. I get that. And even if you did, there's a lot that Donald Trump would have to go through to undermine the money that's going to your individual university. But I understand your hesitation. That's not a justification, Bethune-Cookman, to bring Betsy DeVos to be the commencement speaker. Everything that first of all, if you look at what she stands for ideologically, let alone the person that she represents, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, who has a problem with everything from race down to education. So let alone who she represents, but just what she stands for and how she undermines public schools, what she believes ideologically, what she believes with regards to the school system, what she believes with regards to HBCUs. In the conversation about HBCUs, she had the nerve to say that HBCUs were a product of choice, of school choice. This is not what HBCUs were there for, Betsy. They were literally put there because we couldn't go anywhere else. And it's not just the blatant whitewashing and revisionist history suggesting that HBCUs are completely about school choice. It's because she's using, what bothers me the most rather, is that she's using this language of choice about HBCUs, which is historically inaccurate. She's using it to push and undermine public schools. The entire concept of school choice it's actually a misnomer. It is school defunding of public schools. Right. And so ideologically, historically, she's just completely wrong. Yet I can't call you my alma mater because I didn't graduate from there. But I shed blood, sweat and tears on the marching band field with the pride of Bethune-Cookman College. I'm pretty sure some of the student loans that I'm paying right now are a result of Bethune-Cookman College. So I have a vested interest in what happens at that university. And the fact that the administration and the leadership of that school saw fit to bring someone who is individually problematic and the person for whom she represents is even more problematic to speak at Bethune-Cookman College, Bethune-Cookman University now, commencement. What the entire hell is wrong with the administration there? Somebody's got to tell me something, because we should not co-sign. This is a tacit endorsement of what she believes. And this is what you have to understand. You don't bring someone to your house to speak and say, oh, we don't necessarily agree with what you're not going to be in a position to challenge her. Nobody's going to be there and interrupt and debate her. So she has a free platform to say whatever the hell she wants, which means Bethune-Cookman University is now tacitly endorsing someone who does not know enough about American history and black history to even show up to a black. Maybe she needs to attend Bethune-Cookman University. She doesn't need to be the speaker there. And yet the administration saw fit to have her on because they feel like this is proper politics to ensure your money was fine, Bethune-Cookman. You're not losing any money by not bringing her. But now you put yourself in a position where you're going to lose the relationship that you have with your alumni community, with the broader community, with the broader HBCU community, and with your students. Students are talking about walking out of this speech. And you're damn right. Get up and, I don't know if it's proper for me to say, get the hell up and walk out of that speech, even if it's not proper for me to say. I don't care, because you need to make a statement. You cannot get on stage and challenge what she says. So the only way you can make a statement and to say that you actually disagree with what she says and what she stands for and who she represents is by getting up and walking out. So I want to see that. I think that's the only way to properly respond to someone like Betsy DeVos, who other schools have enough sense to not even let her come in. And so now Bethune-Cookman has put themselves in a position where you did not have to bring her in order to secure your money. But now the dissent and the chaos that's being caused by this might actually undermine you. You could have left well enough alone. The hell, like, there's so many people that you could have picked this year, but I digress. There's so much other news happening right now. I just had to get that off at the top of the hour because I spent a lot of time at Bethune-Cookman out on the marching band field. I've left blood on that field, literally, because I cut myself. So it's not, not really a huge, but it was a lot of blood. I bled, really. He's laughing, but I bled. Sweat and tears. And I have a lot invested. Like, anytime I go to Daytona, I go to Bethune-Cookman. I would never not go there because that is my school, that is my home, and I love everything about Wildcats. I love everything about the Wildcats. And so it's very disappointing to see that this is what has transpired. Okay, we want to get you in on the conversation, 857-600-0518. If you want to join in at the discussion, we're going to be talking about a lot of things that are happening, some amazing headlines. And John, go ahead. You can make that move if you don't mind. Bring me that mouse and that keyboard. I want to make sure I get that screen back up. But what do you think? Should these students opt out? Should they? You have people who are actually graduating who say that they are going to, thank you. Oh, what the, I don't know. It just decided to come back on. All right. We have students who are graduating who say they're going to get up and walk out. And I actually, I 100% support that. All right, let's shift gears now that my computer screen is back on. I want to talk about Jordan Edwards, San Diego. This is another case of police shooting. This time, a 15-year-old kid. He was in a car. Jordan Edwards, an honor student. He went to Mesquite High School, and it was an incident that police officers were responding to a possible shooting, and there was a car full of kids that pulled up, and it's horrible to say it like this, but it seems as though the car pulled up at the wrong time, the wrong place, the wrong time. Police officers shot into the car, killing 15-year-old Jordan Edwards. Some people who are remembering Jordan Edwards had this to say. Chris Kano said that he was a great kid. He had awesome parents. He was not a thug, and this should not have happened. The school, Mesquite, they said Mesquite's deepest sympathies and prayers are with the family and the friends of this young man who tragically lost his life. He was a good student and very well liked by his teachers, coaches, and his fellow students. The entire district, especially the staff and students of Mesquite High School, are mourning this terrible loss. According to another individual, they said, quote, they were simply leaving a party where they believed danger was, so they can't wrap their mind around why an officer decided to shoot inside of the car. And so they were doing what they were supposed to do. In the face of violence, they left. And as they were leaving, a police officer shot into the car, killing Jordan Edwards. So much to say about this. The first thing I would say about this is the fact that we're not really hearing about it on the scale that we should hear about it. Police shootings happen too often, and we should bring light to them every single time it happens. And so the news media should be reporting this even more than it already is. Social media should be talking about this more than it already is. And what I find is if without certain voices, we don't hear about these stories. And I can actually attest to that personally, because I had a friend of mine, Corey Jones, killed by a police officer in Palm Springs, in West Palm Beach, Florida, rather. And if it was not for some key voices, Sean King, namely, the country would not have known about it as soon as they knew about it. But more importantly, they would not have known the person that Corey was. And likewise, I believe Sean is one of the people most intricate in getting this story out and putting out the narrative of who this kid was before anyone could call him a thug. And a lot of times we're in a competition for the narrative, who can be first to cast the narrative. And so it's so important, whether we agree or disagree with everything certain voices do or say, it's important to have these voices, because I personally can attest to how important it is to have people who can get the word out about a person before the police can do their spin. Because in every single one of these cases, we find police officers who will spin, not just police officers, police departments, police unions. They have a vested interest in protecting the police officers no matter how wrong they are. And in order to do that, what they will do is cast every single unarmed person that is shot and killed by police, cast them as a thug, cast them as someone who was problematic, cast them as someone who was dangerous. And so they create a narrative of this police officer being a hero. And thankfully, in this case, the first thing that we hear about Jordan Edwards is that he was an honor student, that he was well loved by his teachers, he was well loved by his school, by his colleagues, and his fellow students at the school, and most of all, he was beloved by his family. And so now we have a 15-year-old young man dead because police officers saw fit to shoot inside of a car when they should have been investigating the call. They should have been investigating the alleged shooting, but instead of going to investigate the shooting, they responded by shooting the car full of kids, killing 15-year-old Jordan Edwards. In San Diego, there was another shooting. This shooting actually blows me away because so little is being said about it. This was in San Diego over the weekend. Policemen say, according to the Washington Post, they're saying a gunman opened fire at a pool party in San Diego on Sunday evening, and he killed one person. Now, of the people he shot, all of them were black. The individual who did the shooting, Peter Raymond Salis, was a 49-year-old white man. Now, but I will give you more details in a second, but I have to make a segue here. Unless there was absolutely no white people on that scene, which does not appear to be the case, if there were other white people or non-black people there, all of the people he shot and killed were black. The reason I'm bringing this out is because the very next thing the police officers say is that they don't believe it was racially motivated. And the reason they don't believe it was racially motivated was because he was having a hard time financially. And he was having a hard time with his significant other, and then they add to that narrative, to give credence to that narrative, possibly, he called his girlfriend, his estranged girlfriend, and made her listen while he shot 6 people, killing 1. And so because of that, they say it's completely irrelevant that he shot 6 black people, or was it 5? It's 5. He shot all black people in this. And so, but they're dismissing the race narrative. Okay. All right. Here's the flip side. The very first thing they're telling you about him is the fact that he had a hard time financially. The very first thing you learn about this guy is that he was having a hard time in his relationship. Not that he was a thug, not that he was a criminal, the David Dow, the man who was pulled off, the doctor who was pulled off of the United Airlines flight for the entire world to see. They did more digging into his negative background than they did this man who just shot and killed one of the individuals shooting others at a pool party. There is a default setting that we fight against in America every single day, that if it's not a non-white person, it's not just black people anymore, but if you're non-white, you are far more likely to have some enterprising journalist dig up your criminal record, even if you are the victim. But in this case, the perpetrator, the narrative being cast about this man, Peter Raymond Sellis, is that he was having a hard time financially and that he was having a hard time with his girlfriend. And that's why, don't look at race. Even though he shot, all black people in a community that was not all black, don't look at race, but just consider the fact that he was having a hard time. Consider the fact that he was, had a hard time financially. He had to go bankrupt and that his girlfriend left him. That's what we should consider. The humanization of the perpetrator, while on the opposite side, we have the complete and utter dehumanization of the victims. 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the conversation. One last story before we go to an interview. We have two interviews tonight. One is with Pamela Getz from the Progressive Army. We want to talk to her about her article that's actually doing very well on progressivearmy.com. Shout out to the entire Progressive Army family. We're also going to talk to Jonathan Cohn about this data from Priorities USA that shows why former Obama supporters shifted and voted for Donald Trump in this election. So we have both of those coming up, and we want to get your input and your feedback. Send your comments in the comments section, and we'll get those up if possible. We'll get those up. This story, the headline for this next story is stranger than fiction, probably strange as fiction. There was an FBI agent who married an ISIS fighter. This story blows me away. There's an FBI translator named Daniela Green who began investigating an ISIS operative in 2014. She went to Syria underneath the guise telling the FBI that she was going to Germany to spend time with her family. Instead, she flew near Syria and went to meet up with this ISIS fighter. You can pull up this image of the ISIS fighter, and they got married. Shortly after marrying him, 2 weeks, and the individual on your right, I'm a little backwards here, the one with the rocket launcher. This is who she married. He's a former German rapper turned ISIS fighter. It gets even crazier. And so after 2 weeks of being married, she realized that she made a mistake. And actually within 2 months, she left. She escaped Syria, which is a story probably in and of itself, because a lot of times when people go over to marry ISIS fighters, they cannot escape. But she managed to escape. She returned to the U.S., turned herself in, arrested, and she has completed a 2-year sentence. Now, we're on this side of her 2-year sentence. We're just now finding out about it. This is probably because the court proceedings were confidential, and now we can just get this information. CNN reached out to her to try to get some information, and she said, if I speak to you, my family will be in danger. She was a translator from Czechoslovakia. She said that she just got in over her head and she made bad decisions. Here's what makes the problem even worse. She was married. When she married the ISIS fighter, she was presently still married to an American soldier. So you have an FBI agent working for the FBI, investigating an ISIS fighter, married to an American soldier, takes a trip to Germany to meet her family, but instead of going to Germany, she ends up in Syria and marries an ISIS fighter and came to her senses. This is the man on your screen. Like, we're not talking about a low-level ISIS fighter. He's a gentleman. I shouldn't even use that term. He's a guy who is featured in in many of their propaganda videos. He's made threatening gestures towards Barack Obama. He's seen in a video holding a beheaded head. But this is the individual she fell in love with. His name is Dennis Cuthbert, and she managed to escape from him to return. This is stranger to this is when I saw the headline, I said this is surely clickbait. But this is one story that the headline actually could not capture how insane the actual story is. What's interesting, one last tidbit that's interesting in the story is that despite her lying to the FBI, despite her, I don't know if this falls into the technical definition of treason, or probably not, but the scale of what she did, she only got 2 years, whereas some people who are simply affiliated with ISIS have gotten up to 13 years in prison. So it's very clear that the FBI took it easy on her. For whatever reason, they took it easy on her, and this is where we find ourselves. 2 years now, the story is out, and she's done her time, and she's a free person. All right, 857-600-0518 is the conversation, the number to call to join the conversation. We have a comment. All right, indeed, thank you for getting, this is from Ryan Rinkin on Twitter. He said, indeed, thank you for getting the narrative out there and keeping his name clean. And this is in regards to Jordan Edward, the young man, and that's the thing. Thank you, Ryan. If we don't put the narrative out there, it won't go. The narrative from the guaranteed right now. I guarantee you, there's a police union president in San Diego who is drafting a press release to defame this young man and to make a hero out of the officer. And that's the standard play. No matter what city you're in, you have the union, you have the police union, you have the police department itself who will participate in this reality. And that reality is the dehumanization of the victim and the humanization of the deification almost of police officers in this case. All right, send your comments. We'll get your comments on the screen and your phone calls. 857. We have another one. All right, let's keep shifting. We're going to be speaking with Pamela as soon as we get her on the line about this article. I think it's a great article. Let's keep going. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this data. Let's talk about this interview. These Priorities USA did some focus groups. They did a survey of 800 individuals who previously supported Barack Obama, who now supported, or in the election supported, Donald Trump. The data that we gleaned from it was actually fascinating. And it tells a story that I actually wanted to bring some backup in to discuss. Jonathan Cohn.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. My
pleasure. Thanks so much for joining me. I've been following your work for a while. You're a researcher, you're an editor, you're an activist. I follow your work here in Boston. You're always on the ground. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a couple of images. Pull up the first image. This is the data. Let's see if we get the data on the screen. All right. So this is a survey that was conducted by Priorities USA. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty establishment.
Yeah, it's one of the major super PACs for the Democratic Party.
Absolutely, big supporters of Barack Obama, or actually, it grew out of the Obama campaign, and they supported Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because as we get ready to dig into this, the very first thing that we dismiss now because of who's conducting it, we should be able to dismiss it because of proper methodology, but the political spin part of it. This is not anyone who has it out for Hillary Clinton. This is someone who was in for Hillary Clinton, and they've done this research.
Yeah, and I know that one of the current heads at Priorities USA used to work for the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee.
Okay.
So it's somebody who's very much so in that sphere of establishment
So
Democratic
for anyone
politics.
who's watching this now and is going to say, oh, this is some type of Bernie bro stuff. It's completely frivolous, fatuous. This is scientific research conducted by people who were in for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the reason I brought you on is because I was reading your comments on it on Twitter.
Yeah.
What's your first major takeaway from the data that you saw?
Yeah, so one of the most interesting things that I thought, so it's not on the screen here, but it was when they were looking at similarities between the drop-off voters and the Obama-Trump voters. Mm-hmm. Since there are two dynamics that you saw back in November. There was a kind of a small percentage of people, it would be in the single digits, but elections are won on the margins.
Right.
That people who had voted either Obama-Trump, or then maybe just Obama-Trump.
Okay.
So there are people who flipped, but there are also people who just decided not to vote at all.
Right.
That maybe they came out both elections, maybe they just came out one, and then they decided I'm staying home. Mm-hmm. And one thing that was particularly fascinating is one similarity between them was reported economic anxiety.
Right.
Where the Obama-Trump voters, there's about something about like 50% of them reported that they were kind of having difficulty with that the cost of living was outpacing their earnings, and then another 31% said they were just getting by. Mm-hmm. For those who are drop-off voters, those numbers were, I believe, 43 and 49.
Okay.
So in both cases, it's going to be people who tended to be more working class and are economically struggling.
Okay.
And yet you have kind of one group decides to flip, the other decides not to vote at all.
All right.
Often connected to what they think of how much they disagree with and dislike Donald Trump.
So I'm going to do something completely unprofessional here, but I want to make sure that the people could see you good. You mind coming into the shot just a little more? Just a little bit more that way. Perfect. Now everyone can see your beautiful face.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So this is a survey of people who either didn't vote.
Yeah.
Or they voted for Donald Trump and they previously voted for Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And in most of the findings, it was legitimately about economic anxiety.
Yeah, or at least reported. So like it's difficult to know exactly like their own economic circumstance.
Right.
But when talking with the voters, that's what they reported about their own living standards.
Okay, so
and this is in Michigan and Wisconsin, just for additional.
So let's break this apart real quick. Let's break this apart because one of the number one things we fought in this election was class versus race. It's an ongoing argument. And anyone who voted for Donald Trump was considered a racist or racist adjacent, I think John calls it. Racist adjacent. Like they were okay enough with racism to vote for Donald Trump. So and again, to underscore what you've already said, this is not proof that they were not racist. This just shows that they stated that they have economic anxiety.
Yeah, and I think it's an important thing to understand is that when anybody makes a decision for how to vote, there are many factors going on at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that you can see almost in the contrast of there are two groups of people, both who are economically struggling, who are at least reported economically struggling, and had a degree of dissatisfaction with kind of the status quo, obviously with the Democratic Party. Some decided I'm going to sit home. Some decided I'm going to vote for Donald Trump.
Okay.
And for those who decided to vote for Donald Trump, there is there is likely some of what I would call like a passive racism, at least, that it's not like every person who voted Donald Trump is a closet member of the Klan.
Yeah.
But there are people who are willing to accept some of what he was saying, that they were willing to tolerate it, to go along with it, and to vote for him rather than taking, let's say, the apathetic route of pox on both their houses, I'm sitting this one out.
All right, so let's break down some of the numbers and then we'll come back to, because the political commentary or the commentary in general around it, I think is very important because it's how we're going to use this data to shape conversations going forward that actually determines whether or not the Democratic Party can become the party of the people. And I think this is some of what we see in this first graph. The first question that we have up here, and again, this was reported by the Washington Post. Washington Post.
Yeah, Greg Sargent in the Washington Post.
All right, special thanks to Greg for getting this information out, Sargent, and Priorities USA for doing this research. Persuadable voters believe Donald Trump will help the middle class over the wealthy, but don't feel the same about congressional Republicans. This was fascinating to me. So they did not believe the Republican Party was going to take care of them. But at least 50% thought, or 50% thought the Republicans. Actually, let me gather this together, right? So 50% thought that the Republican economic policies would favor the rich.
Yeah, of those with mixed feelings about Donald Trump.
Of those with mixed feelings about Donald Trump versus mixed feelings about Donald Trump, do you think congressional Democrats' economic policies will favor 38% of those who had mixed feelings about Donald Trump felt the same way about the Democrats? But for Donald Trump, 26% for those would have mixed feelings. It seems as though they don't believe in the Democrats, they don't believe in the Republicans, but those who left Obama and came to Trump believe that Trump would take care of the middle class.
Yeah, and what was particularly fascinating when seeing this data to me is how it made me remember back in the election about the conscious effort from the Clinton campaign to distance Trump from congressional Republicans.
Right.
I know in some of the leaked emails or the hacked emails that we had seen that was a direct strategy from the Clinton campaign communicated to the DNC that they wanted to make sure that they're saying that Trump, that he's an anomaly in the Republican Party, he's worse, he's kind of messing with that existed there, and then kind of contrasting him with perhaps the good Republicans. Yeah. And this shows somewhat of a fallout of that. Right. Because if you're constantly trying to distance Trump from congressional Republicans, and people don't like congressional Republicans,
then you're sabotaging yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you're saying this guy's different, and if he's different, maybe it's different, it can be different in a good way, it could be different in a bad way, but if people want change, it makes them more receptive to what he's saying, that at least he's making the right enemies in their mind. Yeah. That if these people don't think that he's troublesome, maybe he's troublesome for the right reasons. He's not, but it opens up that possibility.
Right. So and not to restate what you've already stated, but I think it may have gotten lost. The Democratic Party made a conscious decision not to tie Donald Trump to the Republican Party in hopes of gleaning some of the moderate Republicans for Hillary Clinton. And in doing that, they left a wide opening that actually helped Donald Trump, because they were like, well, Donald Trump isn't the Republican Party. Donald Trump is something in and of himself.
Exactly, and you even saw that throughout the campaign when Clinton would celebrate endorsements that she was getting from prominent, often Republican leaning or Republican donating figures, or even people who ran as Republicans in the past, like Meg Whitman, who had run as a Republican candidate for governor in California, and she was having Meg Whitman go on the stump for her. And I know that there was a former Reagan official who spoke at the convention.
Exactly.
There was a woman that I believe she's worked for the Chamber of Commerce. Her job was actually to lobby against the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
And she had a speaking engagement in the convention.
She was there. She was part of it.
And there was also Clinton's desire to have Republican national security experts, many of them who are staunch neocons, to kind of speak her praises and kind of get them to defect from.
And so this is the gaping hole that allow a narrative to be built that Donald Trump isn't the Republican Party. But now, on this side of it, clearly anyone who's seeing this data now, or anyone that responded this way, clearly should be able to see that a lot of what Donald Trump is doing is in lockstep with the Republican Party. So we missed, and when I say we, those of us who didn't want Donald Trump to be president, we missed the golden opportunity to tie him to the policies that we knew were coming.
Exactly, and with Donald Trump, he's such a perfect kind of example of, so to say, the various ills of capitalism in one person, that would have been a really easy thing to run against.
Yeah, perfectly.
It's kind of, when you think about in 2012, where there was an effort from the Obama campaign to paint Mitt Romney as this billionaire who's out for his billionaire friends and doesn't care about you. Whereas the Clinton campaign often avoided discussing policy in ads. I know that there had been one study that looked at this, and it showed that only 25% of the ads in her favor talked policy, and then 90% of the ads, kind of from Clinton-allied groups against Donald Trump, were focused mainly on Trump as an individual rather than policy issues.
Right, and I'm reminded of the survey of campaign ads that showed that Hillary Clinton's campaign ads were not substantive on policy whatsoever. Yeah,
and which was a kind of, and even there was a striking contrast from past years of campaigns, where hers is like below what the prior low had been, since parties typically engage in a certain amount of policy content now.
Here's what I want to push back, not so much against you, but you're kind of standing in proxy for Greg here and for priorities. Donald Trump had a masterful way of never being held to a single policy anyway. And if something was said in a debate, for instance, that was negative from the Republican Party, Donald Trump would right there on the spot say something that's positive and that's populist, and that he probably would have convinced people anyway, whether or not Hillary Clinton's campaign went to tie him to the Republican Party. What do you think about that?
So it is possible. It is impressive that Donald Trump can have, let's say, 5 different opinions on a single issue within a matter of a few minutes.
For a few minutes,
However, I think that speaks to kind of a different dynamic of the need to have an affirmative agenda on the other side. That Donald Trump might be able to talk every which way about a given issue. Some of those ways good, some of those ways objectively terrible. So like few of those ways good, most of those ways objectively terrible. But that means that you have to have a positive and affirmative thing on the other side.
Which we didn't have this time.
Exactly. And that one thing I'll say that Clinton did have many white papers on her website. And so some people will complain that it's not right to say that her campaign didn't have policies. And they did. They did have, and there were often, some of them were very detailed, some less. The problem was that nobody's going to be going to your campaign website to find that out.
Exactly.
That I know I'm a rowdy. I like looking at campaigns, like candidates' campaign websites and what they say on various things. I know I'm not the average voter.
Right.
Even
it can't exist online, right?
Exactly.
You can tell people to go to your website all you want. People are not going to consume white pages, right? So that can't be the excuse, right? You have to have, at most, they're going to take a 1-page PDF with bullet points, max.
Exactly, because a lot of people just simply don't have the time. And I remember when looking at the issues page on her website, it kind of looked like a Pinterest page, and it was alphabetically ordered of like issue by issue. And it's even difficult if I were someone and I heard somebody tell me about all of the great issues that or the issue papers that Clinton had on this positions, I would be confused when I went there because I wouldn't even know where to begin. Okay. And it speaks to the need for kind of an overarching narrative to combine all of that together.
All right. Let's toggle to the next image and take a look at John. Switch to the next image you wanted us to go over. so we could discuss the meaning rather of that next data.
While that's going on, I just want to make one more quick point.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
In the running for that. One thing I thought was particularly interesting that this relates to, so that there was research, I can't remember if the paper formally came out yet or not, but it was by a scholar at UMass Amherst, the name was Jesse Rhodes. It was looking at over from like 1952 to, I can't believe if it ended in 2008 or 2012, and looking at voters, what they liked the most about the Democratic Party and the least, what they liked the most about Republicans and what they said they liked the least. Yeah. And typically it was a class for what people said was the best thing about the Democratic Party. It was that it was, quote, the party of the working class. Right. And what they liked the least about Republicans, it was that the party of big business and the upper class.
Right, right.
And
That's
it was
important.
interesting to see an election in which that dynamic really didn't play in. To a lot of the rhetoric on both sides.
Interesting. All right, let's shift gears to the next image. Trump supporters prioritize Social Security, Medicare, and jobs, but only strong supporters prioritize immigration and trade. So this goes to the core of and this is, again, these are the people that switched from Obama to Trump, and they switch prioritizing Social Security, Medicare, and jobs. So this cuts right to the core of the question of whether or not these voters were just racist, which I have plenty of commentary on in a minute. But I mean, we can't just toss this out.
Yeah, and I think that this speaks to one other dynamic that I noted before, that insofar as that there are some similarities between drop-off voters and people who flipped, that they're very different. They're different in how they view Donald Trump. But insofar as there are shared economic anxieties, if you focus on getting the people who dropped off to turn out, you can have positive spillover to those who flipped, because you'd be addressing those kind of issues that they share.
Right, those substantive issues. And did we discuss Social Security or Medicare and jobs in a substantive fashion in this campaign? And the answer is, I mean, not really.
Yeah, so like there are things that they might come up, but for an average voter who isn't reading as much media content as I am on an everyday basis, I couldn't fault them for not thinking of it. Wow.
And then those, and I don't want to minimize this, but those who prioritize immigration, it was a percentage. Let's see where it is on here. Immigration.
Deporting
immigrants who are in the country illegally. You had 30% of Republicans who formerly voted for, they swapped over to Obama. 30% said it's not important, right? Those who had mixed feelings. I mean, what is your take on that?
I would say that, and I think it's interesting when you see that there is a contrast between, you have some people who, and probably a lot of those in the mixed feelings would be the group of people who saw their vote as a vote against Clinton more than a vote for Trump. Yeah. So that if those who saw their vote as definitely a vote for Trump, you'll likely see a lot more overt racism and stronger xenophobia. Whereas you'll see people, and those who had mixed feelings about him, they might not like some of that. They might be willing to tolerate it, but their animosity is toward what they see as not having benefited from the years of Democratic rule.
So those 50% of those who were strongly supported Donald Trump. So now this goes to that argument that they couldn't possibly be racist because they voted for Obama. But now we're saying 50% of those who left Obama and went to Trump, 50% of those who have strong feelings, strongly support Donald Trump, they felt that deporting immigrants who were in the country illegally was an important issue.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one thing that's, when discussing the role of, let's say, racism in the election last year, I think one thing that's always important to realize is that racism isn't a binary. It follows much more of a spectrum, because it's not as though, say, every person who's a racist in the United States is basically a Klan member. Yeah. And then you're either a Klan member or then you're one of the good ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's far more complex, and that's also just thinking in terms of one thing that Obama might have gotten many people to vote for him despite their racism. That they may have, because people are a bundle of different issue positions and preferences and feelings, and some rational and some not. And for any election, it's what you can get them to cast their vote on. Okay. So you might have had people who, even in the last election, that they were hostile to immigrants, but they cast their vote on something else.
Right. So it's more of a statement that for Obama's populist message, they were willing to overcome their racism. But now that they saw that Obama didn't really help them on their it didn't actually govern as a populist, they just went right on back to where they were.
Yeah, and then one thing I will say, that one thing that definitely didn't help Democrats is the fact that a lot of people don't understand the way the federal government works. So Obama could have done a lot more. he was somewhat limited by congressional Republicans, but what people will see will be the person up at the front. And that'll be the presidency. And I think that probably also ends up making it so that people will say, well, because I didn't benefit from 8 years of him, let's try the other side.
All right.
In part, it's a mixed bag. A lot of it is that Republicans don't want to help people, but there is a lot that Obama could have done in executive power, or when you had full Democratic control, that would have improved the situation.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think we have a comment from either Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Let's take a look at it. On YouTube, John Stephen Frank says, Clinton couldn't run ads on policy that appealed to the populace without pissing off the DNC donors. I mean...
Which is true, and that reminds me of one thing I was thinking of earlier, is the fact that at the DNC's convention earlier this year, where they chose the new chair, they voted down a ban on donations from corporate lobbyists.
Right.
And that kind of just shows that in conflict, that kind of in the Democratic Party that gives rise to things like people saying the congressional Democrats is working primarily for the rich, is that kind of like you can't serve two masters, so to speak.
Yeah.
That
I felt the sermon in there.
that if you're going to be, you can't both be is one way I can put it before. You can't both be the party of the lobbyists who are fighting the Affordable Care Act and the people benefiting from it.
Yeah.
You can't be both the candidate for the person lobbying against the Employee Free Choice Act.
Yeah.
And the candidate of the unions.
Yeah. Let's pull up the next comment. John, I mean, my producer back there is killing it. Old Maryland on YouTube said, this is what's wrong with the Democratic Party, too. They stand for what? What issues? And I think what we're gleaming from this conversation is that, like you said, they want to have it both ways. They want to have corporate donors, corporate lobbyists, money coming in. They want to be okay. They want to be in bed with Wall Street. They want it to be okay for them to get $400,000 speeches from Wall Street and just have a revolving door. And they never want to let go of the working class. And if they do let go of the working class, it's the racist working class that they're letting go of. Right. So, what's your take on it?
Yeah, because I think it's one thing that I've heard over time from people of various, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or people who are neither, that you know what Republicans stand for. It's often it may be something bad, but you do know what Republicans stand for. And with the Democrats, it's much less clear. And sometimes it's because Democrats run away from their positions, and sometimes it's because Democrats like kind of very kludgy policies that are difficult for people to even understand, so that they don't even know if they're benefiting from the policy. Yeah. Sometimes it's because Democrats like along the lines of like the kludgocracy, they like benefiting what they're doing. They're like putting it into the tax code where people don't actually see that they're benefiting.
Right, exactly.
So it's difficult to see like, this is the tangible thing that I'm getting because of democratic governance. And I like this, and I want to see more of that.
And I think the biggest takeaway that I got from this survey was that the working class, even some of the racist working class, but the working class in general, they're searching. They're going back and forth between parties, and they're willing to switch and swap as needed for somebody who's going to actually do something for the middle class / working class, and they're not finding it. So, I mean, what do you think about that?
And I think that speaks to a lot of looking into the election. There are some elections happening this year, 2018, or even looking out to 2020. The Democrats really do need to have a very clear message, and a message that's also reflected in how the party operates. Yeah. So that you need to have a very clear and robust message about how you're going to help people, how you're going to take on the large pharmaceutical companies, how you're going to talk on the banks, how you're going to talk on the health insurance companies, industries that actually are having a negative impact on people's everyday life and their ability to afford and to have a decent standard of living. But you also need to reflect that needs to be reflected in how you operate as a party, because the strength and believability and credibility of that message will be limited if you're taking money from the same people.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan Cohn, activist, researcher, editor, thanks so much for joining me, man. I think this was a very valuable conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I think we're actually, they did the research, but in terms of an autopsy, like, it's not really happening. So
yeah, that's one thing that I've been disappointed with, is that no clear idea from the DNC when there will be an autopsy report. Yeah. And there had been an article in Politico the other day that the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee is treating their autopsy report kind of like the torture report, keeping it like so that you can only view it under close supervision. Yeah. So I thought it was really interesting to be able to have this data available.
And to have this conversation, man. Thanks so much for joining me. Love to have you back anytime you're available.
I'd love to be back.
857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the discussion. I think we're hitting it spot on. We have a caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name? What is it's been so long since it's been so long since we had a caller. I forgot my speech. What is your name, comment, and question? But actually, this is Pamela Getz. I stand corrected. Pamela Getz of the Progressive Army. She's written an article. Let me slide out of the way. Problematic liaisons attacking progressive women of color. She wrote it with one of our producers, David Grossman. Pamela, you should be live. How are you? Make sure
I'm doing okay. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing great. I see we finally got connected. Listen, your article is doing well. And more importantly than it just doing well, your article says a lot about an ongoing problem of the Democratic establishment being willing to attack women and people of color in order to protect a particular narrative. Tell me about the article that you wrote.
Well, there's a Twitterer. Her name's Sally Albright, and she came kind of sideways at Nina Turner, Senator Nina Turner. She said that she was Bernie's Omarosa. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even a fan of Omarosa, but this kind of hit me in my soul. It was, we have to have someone who leads us. We can never lead. So the insinuation being that, Bernie used her for cover. She's just a face. She mm-hmm. doesn't have any ideas or, goals to accomplish, that she's just following behind Bernie, and then he pulls her out for cover when he needs a black face.
Well, and Pamela, let me...
Omarosa, and I don't agree with... Okay.
No, I don't mean to cut you off, but I actually want to amplify what you're saying, because this is not just this is not a random Twitter user, right? This is clearly a Democratic operative who was formerly a Republican operative. This is somebody who is very intentionally and strategically going after people of color and to paint this narrative. So this isn't something that we're just complaining about a random person on Twitter. This is really a voice that is active in the Democratic establishment, coming after people of color, particularly Nina Turner and even Omarosa, who I'm not a fan of, but you're going to watch how you talk about people when you're around us. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. When you say that and you take that agency away from black women specifically, I mean, we saw this in Wendy Muse's piece back during the March in January, that the women of color just pushed off to the side, mm-hmm. and then it's this day off work. Yeah. And I mean, not that there's not something to be fought for on every front, but they take those numbers and push them off to the side for the optics of, oh, look how many people we have, but you never speak to any of the other people. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then you want to use their numbers that come to the progressive people, and then come on, we want a unity tour. We want to, work with you. Yeah. We want to have, work with you. But you're crazy, and you were stupid for following Bernie. He misled you, and you don't have common enough sense. And I'm like, well, are you trying to convince me to come in here, or are you slamming me that I don't have good sense, and I need you to take my hand and lead me across the street? Right, exactly. And and Nina is just so passionate about everything, and she spoke everywhere, and she's so eloquent, and then to say she's just a cover for Bernie, and then to try to turn it around and say, well, I like Nina. I liked Omarosa's wedding dress, but no.
There are no buts. Yeah, so this speaks to...
There is no buts. You can't...
Yeah, so this speaks to an ongoing reality. Right. It actually ties into the conversation I just got through having with Jonathan Cohn. The fact that in order to preserve the Democratic status quo, there's no strategy that they're not willing to ignore. Like they'll ignore all of the data, and there's no people of color that they will not steamroll over or completely ignore. And really in the primaries, it was more of ignoring people of color. That was really their tactic, or whitewashing us. I remember the hashtag that Leslie Lee came up with, Bernie made me white. So they completely whitewashed us They either ignored us or completely whitewashed us. But now we're on this side of it, and it's like they're doubling down on the stupid and doing everything that helped them to lose. They're doing it again, all for the purposes of preserving power. Tell me a little bit more about your reason. Like, why do you think this is happening? That's my take. But why do you think they're continuing to double down on this failed strategy?
Lack of motivation, because they don't want to have to work any harder. They want our numbers, but they don't want to hear our voices. They want to take, because our numbers are growing. They need those numbers.
Yeah.
They need us at the polls. They want those Bernie crowds to show up for the Democratic,
but not really ask for anything.
Right, but they don't want us to say, well, we need you to work for this. We need you to vote against this. And we just see them making these votes against everything progressive stands for. That's why, because they know we don't support that. So they try to belittle us and our ideology. Well, you just want too much. You need to wait. Meanwhile, we're the ones who are the placeholders for suffering. It's going to take time to get all of that. You just have to be patient. And like James Baldwin says, how much longer do I have to wait? You've used up my mother's time, my grandmother's time, my time. My children are going to have to wait.
Wow.
They want us to wait and hold the place for all of the negatives of them not coming up with workable policies and sticking to their guns when they do have one.
I got to double back on something you said. They're using us as for placeholders for suffering, right? It's like wait on your. I don't have a better phrase right now. Forgive the religious terminology, but wait on your deliverance. Like, this is, and here's the thing that bothers me the most, Pam, is that they get away with this by erasing the fact that what we're waiting on are policies to help the working class, but they get away with it by making the entire working class white and racist. Therefore, it's okay for us to not worry about economic anxiety, because in the face of economic anxiety, we would actually have to help black people. But there are no black poor people. Everybody black is like the Cosby family or whoever, the family from Blackish. They're all doing fine.
Oprah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
That's
I'm sorry.
interesting that you said that, because in her thread where all this came up, she was copying and pasting pieces from an article by Marcus Johnson. And he was like, well, the progressives are trying to put this off that the Democrats had lost the white working class. And then he was like, but we don't need to worry about the white working class.
Good
but
job.
Then she comes back and says, well, we need to find out what the white working class needs. And I'm going, so you're championing not worrying about them, but you want to know what they need.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the black working class is still like, hey, we still back here.
Yeah.
We
Absolutely.
we've been holding this place. We take the brunt of it because of hiring practices. They don't want to hire Letitia because she has a black sounding name.
Yeah.
And this just keeps going over. Race and the economics, like Michael Graham said in his article, are tied together. You can't separate those two.
We have a comment. No, absolutely. They're inseparable. You can't separate the two. Let's take a look. I want to read this comment from YouTube. Sophie and me on YouTube said, going after Nina Turner was a huge mistake. And I have to co-sign that, right? We're not elevating Nina Turner to a level that she's untouchable, but you're not going to touch her with bullshit, right? You're not going to come after her with some bullshit. Go ahead.
Don't come for Nina. Just don't, because she's there with us.
Yeah.
She's lived it. Donna Edwards commented on the piece. She's lived it. As long as she was in good favor, they were fine. She was wonderful. She was talented, and she was a rising star.
Donna Edwards from Maryland, right?
Position changed. Now suddenly she's not. I'm sorry.
I was saying Donna Edwards running for Senate in Maryland, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and now that she has different positions on these, then, no, she's not talented enough. She doesn't have enough experience and skill to do it. And this is what we see a lot of times, from grade school up, when kids of color make those programs, write those articles, and then people want to question, well, who wrote that for you? Did your parents help you with that?
Yeah, well, actually, and if I could underscore that a little bit, it's a very It's a master stroke of political, not just propaganda, but political strategy, right? They have a better strategy at suppressing voices of color from the left than they do fighting against republicanism, right? They're masters at this. Look at what they do. They will select those who have no problem with the economic status quo and elevate those black voices to the top and let them come out and say, look, we're intersectional. We represent black. What's our auntie name? Everybody calls her auntie name now. She's the one that's going after Maxine Waters, like Auntie Maxine. Like, and I got nothing bad to say about Auntie Maxine. Go ahead and get Trump. But look at how they support her. And she says nothing about the economics of the working class. That's not her job right now. I get that. But look at how they support her versus how they go after Nina Turner. Like, they legitimately tried to destroy Nina Turner. They went after her and undermined her at the Democratic National Convention, all because she had the nerve to endorse somebody other than Queen Hillary.
Exactly. And Joan Walsh was in that too.
Joan Walsh from The Nation.
And tagged Nina on Twitter. She said, I don't think my friend Nina would risk her career like that. That's a threat.
Yes.
That's not a friendly message between best friends.
That's
a threat. A public threat.
Mm-hmm. Pamela Getz, thank you so much for writing this. It's actually picking up. I think we have a couple more hundred, if not a more 1,000 views since I took this screenshot before the show. The article is picking up. It's entitled "Problematic Liaisons Attacking Progressive Women of Color," and this is absolutely the truth. Thank you so much for writing that, and thank you for writing it with David Grossman.
All right. Thank you for having me on, Ben.
My pleasure. Folks, this is about all the time we have. We have about 2 minutes. If there's a comment or a call, or maybe we'll take that. But if not, what do you say, John? Let's get out of here. We'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same channel, and we'll see you. Flawless.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.
Almost flawless. All right, well, we're just going to hit the stream there. Go ahead and end the stream. All right, folks, good night.